Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. This is Kenneth Amaduri, and we're going to be focused in on cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin today. What's going on? Bitcoin held 10,000 for quite a long time, and it seemed to fall like a rock to the $8,000 range. We're right around 8,200 as I record this interview here. And we're going to be talking with Gary Leland of cryptopodcaster.com. He's, my goodness, has just such a number of different things he's involved with, many podcasts and many ventures. And so he's a real smart guy. He's somebody who's identified the crypto opportunity at a very early time. So he's a pioneer. He's someone who had a lot of vision on where the trend was going to be. He, on a very simple level, he anticipated that there were going to be more buyers than there are sellers in the space. And people who did that flat out made a killing if they bought at the right time. But I think what's more important right now as we do this interview is what to make of the current situation. And before I go any further, he's obviously an enthusiast in the space. He's the founder of the conference Block Boom. So I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about that. But without any further ado, Gary, thanks for coming on Crush the Street with me today.
Hey, it's always nice coming on the air with you. I enjoy it. We'll meet in person someday, I know. But
we're not too far away from each other, both Texas residents here. So God bless Texas. Let's chat about what I was saying there right in the beginning. $10,000 Bitcoin. What happened that, we seem to correct down to $8,000 pretty quickly? You see all this analysis now of people drawing lines and doing technical chart work showing that, hey, if we go down a little further and then, the floor goes even lower and lower and lower. This is kind of like the fear moment for people in the crypto space. They're not getting very confident as to what might happen to Bitcoin here as it's falling.
yeah, I think you're 100% correct there on people. People especially who are new in the space, they're not used to seeing this. If you've been in this space for a while, you don't even look at your Bitcoin to see what's going on because you're not concerned because the long term is what you're looking at. But there are probably several things. Bakkt came out. Some people might say the short amount of contracts or small amount of contracts they had for Bitcoin could have caused it. But really, if you think about it, an old saying that I was told from the time I was a kid from my mother is, you buy on the rumor, you sell on the news. And Bakkt came out and the price went down. So that kind of sticks with an old stock strategy. You buy on the rumor, sell on the news. Then you have people saying it's because Google announced that they've got quantum computing figured out and someone's going to be able to crack the blockchain. The basic thing is there's more people selling than people buying, as to why they're selling, could be a combination of several different factors. But if you've not been in the space a while and you haven't seen Bitcoin crash 4 times, 5 times, or seen it claimed dead 200 times, you have a better chance of being feared. You throw $10,000 in there and buy Bitcoin and you look the next day it's worth $8,000. A lot of people panic, and this market really also is easy to manipulate right now. By Bitcoin whales who are wanting to pick up more. So they can sell it, lower the price, and buy more at a lower price. So there are a lot of reasons we could claim that it's happening.
Sure. Well, and full disclosure, silver's down 3% today. I bought silver, over the weekend at $17.59 an ounce, and silver's, $17.08 as we speak. But my long-term forecast for silver is much higher than $17. So I'm not really that concerned.
Right.
But
a lot of people, I think, that get into Bitcoin don't do their homework, just like you're giving that example of silver. I think a lot of people that get into Bitcoin just get into it. They think it's going to do really good, and which I believe, but they get into it with no rational thought or decision or research. And those are the people that usually get hurt in any market, whether it's stock, silver, or Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Well, let's chat about what's going on with Bitcoin here. Leading up to this correction, we saw Bitcoin hash rate hitting record highs. Maybe it still is at record highs. I actually don't know that. But what's your thoughts on this? And, what is it implicating going forward? Were people expecting, a moonshot from 10,000 to 50,000? So, they were getting out there and mining it. What's some of the rationale for this hash rate hitting record highs?
Well, you got to realize you're saying 10,000, but if you really just go back a few months further to like April, it was 14,000. It hit 14. So if we're going to use numbers as to how high it went, recent, let's go to 14 instead of the 10. It's down quite a bit from that time. I remember my wife woke me up in bed at 2:00 in the morning one night because it was 14, saying, we got to buy some, we got to buy some. So I'm not getting out of bed to go buy Bitcoin at 2:00 in the morning. But getting back to your question, the hash rate, I think people do expect it to moon. I think there's no doubt there's a ton of people who expect it to moon, but those are the people that are hodling or holding, and they're not going to sell no matter what happens. They're not selling their Bitcoin.
Well, I'd like to get your thoughts then on the maneuvering, the pivoting that's might have happened in the space, maybe based on your experience. What has it been like, when you started off in crypto, going through the 2017 bull market, going through the 2018 bear market. Here we are once again with Bitcoin, getting some life. If you consider that it bottomed out at that, $3,000 range there. People weren't sure, they were questioning it. What's it going to do? Is it going back to 1,000? But then it really moonshotted from 3,000 to 14,000. A lot of life that got injected back into the space, even though there was a lot of people who bought Bitcoin 15,000, right? Going back to November, December of 2017. So it's still down if, you got caught up in the hype at the wrong time and are looking at an $8,000 Bitcoin price. So anyway, saying a lot right there. What is just your general sentiment on the space right now? And, where are we going from here? Fundamentally, maybe price. What are your thoughts?
Well, on the statement you just made, I'm going to incorporate that into it. Bitcoin has been out roughly just over 10 years since Bitcoin was created. So let's say it's 120 months that Bitcoin has been in existence. Or maybe it's like 124 months now. So out of that time period of 124 months, if you'd bought in any month out of those 124 months, except for I think 3 of them, you're up right now. So it's not like there are the people who bought at 14 and 15 and 19 who got hurt, but that was a short span on that window of pricing that got that high. So for the most part, and I can't remember the number of days, but if you take the number of days you could have bought out of the number of days, Bitcoin's been in existence, it's the same kind of numbers. So the majority of people that have Bitcoin should be up. The problem is, when I first got into Bitcoin, I told a friend of mine who's a real smart guy, I think a lot of, I've known him forever, and I told him I'm getting into Bitcoin. I just bought a good amount of Bitcoin. And he goes, oh, Gary, don't do that. Everybody I know has lost money in Bitcoin. Everybody. And I go, well, gosh, seeing how Bitcoin at this moment is the highest it's ever been, and it was in the $3,000 range. I don't know how they could have lost a lot of money unless they sold it. And he goes, yeah, they sold it because they lost all that money. And I said, well, that's when they lost their money, is when they sold it. So I've seen it go up. I've seen it go down. I've seen it go up. I've seen it go down. I've seen it go from 19 to 3,200 or whatever, like you were talking about. And I rode it all the way down, which was pretty stupid. But now I'm riding it all the way back up, and I've been acquiring more. I started acquiring more Bitcoin when it got back down to 3,000. So I'm not a financial advisor, but to me, the math makes sense because it's basically just math, Bitcoin. And a lot of other factors make sense that it's worth hodling or worth holding on to. And that's what I'm a big believer in.
Well, good for you for holding on to it. I know a lot of people, and they're just victims of the market. We're all human, right? The emotions of the market. How many people maybe did buy $1,000 Bitcoin, but they only dipped their toe in the water and then got excited as it ran up, right? And like, okay, well, now I was a believer. I really want to put skin in the game. And then they're going in at 15,000. And I also think about a lot of the developers and people that were part of it in 2010, 2011, 2012. How many of those people got washed and rinsed, sold their Bitcoin for $30 and were pioneers in the space, but, just saw a profit and then we're done. You know what I mean? Like it's a rough world out there, and markets have a way of washing and rinsing investors.
And that's in any market, as we know. I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, man, I knew I should have bought that stock. I would be a millionaire now, but they wouldn't be, because it would have gone from the $10 they saw it at to 100, then dropped to 80 and they'd have got out of it while they made their profit. Then it would have gone up to the $1,000 or whatever. And so Bitcoin is no different than any other commodity or stock when it comes to that. As people, whether people want to take the chance and ride with it. I see quite often an old Twitter post someone will, retweet where someone said, I'm sick of this Bitcoin. I'm getting out while it's $25, So, I mean, that's pretty common in anything. So it's kind of like saying Bitcoin's for crime. That's pretty common to say. There are a lot of things that are common with dollars, any currency, any stock, any commodity. So I take no heed in that.
Gary, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin in this environment. Bitcoin dominance, what is 67%? It kind of does good when, everything starts to collapse. It becomes a safe haven. And then, when it's doing really well, a lot of times, when everything else catches up, that's when it kind of loses some of its dominance. Before this interview here, you were very comfortable describing yourself as a Bitcoin maximalist. I'd like to ask you a little bit about that, if you would. Sure. Why Bitcoin and why not the potential for another cryptocurrency that could arguably be better?
Well, I'm not saying that there can't be another crypto that's going to come along and do something. I think long-term, Bitcoin can do anything else that can do anything any other currency can do long-term. Bitcoin is just really slow at moving, which is good. If you have a lot of money in Bitcoin, you don't want anything happening really fast. But I used the Litecoin as an example a minute ago. What's the purpose of it? I mean, if you want a coin, it doesn't cost as much. Do you have to have one? I mean, is it because you want one? It's not like you carry it around with you. Why wouldn't you just have 1/100th of a Bitcoin? There are a lot of things. And I see a lot of people who I have talked to before, and then they've invested in another coin. They sold their Bitcoin and they bought something else because they thought they could make some money at it. And the coin went up, but Bitcoin went up at the same time. And by the time they moved their money back into Bitcoin, they had less than they started with, even though they made money off the other coin. So maybe they bought coin B and they went up and said, oh my, coin B is up 10%. I made some money. Then they put it back in Bitcoin and Bitcoin went up 11%. So they lost some money into it. So, like I said, I don't think there's really a whole bunch that Bitcoin can't do. Like right now, they're building a Lightning Network, a protocol on top of it. It's kind of like when the internet came out. They had the internet, and then they built email, and then they built FTP. I mean, not in that order. And they built secure HTTPS. They built all these overlying layers, and that's what I think is going to happen with Bitcoin. You'll have all these overlying layers that perform functions that are needed. So, sure. Like I said, I'm not giving anyone a hard time for buying a coin. Everybody, and I have made money buying other coins, but like I said, I think long term you'll make more money. I just believe I'll make more money just holding on to Bitcoin.
So let's talk a little bit about Litecoin, if you would, maybe as an example for some of the other cryptos. We've seen Litecoin really, I guess, disappoint a lot of people. Many people have described it as silver to Bitcoin's gold. And I know Charlie Lee has described it as such. And even after the halving, Litecoin really disappointed, right? It actually preceded, it led the fall that we saw in the crypto space, to Bitcoin. Bitcoin fell after we saw Litecoin move down quite a bit. So is there any practical use for Litecoin in the future here? What are your thoughts on it? Is it just speculative at this point, in your opinion?
Well, I don't want to get the whole Litecoin world on me, but like I said, I'm just not a big believer in Litecoin. If you get to Charlie, he sold all his Litecoin. The guy who believes in it and created it sold it all. So to me, that was kind of a telling sign that if you had any Litecoin, you might have wanted to sell your Litecoin while it was $300 like he did. And that was a great move on his part. I mean, I'm not knocking the guy for being smart, that's for sure. But, you know, back in February, I was at an event that there were a ton of Litecoin people at, and they were just going off the wall about it. Because what was it, like $105, $110 earlier in the year? And like you said, you're expecting it to go up in the halving, and the halving comes and it drops. I think it gets back to my thing is, what is the purpose of Litecoin? If you want a cheaper coin, just buy less Bitcoin. It serves the same function. It's a fork of Bitcoin, you know, to me. So unless you think that there's an opportunity to make money off of Bitcoin, I don't see anyone that's buying Bitcoin because they want to do some purchases with it. Really, most people I see buying Litecoin are buying it to do something. Where on Bitcoin, you know, you got the Lightning Network going, and people really are working hard on that Lightning Network. And at my conference, people were coming up wanting to pay with Lightning. So I was at that Litecoin conference. I didn't have anyone that wanted to pay with Litecoin, and I did have people pay because I run a t-shirt shop that sells t-shirts. It's called Crypto Crybaby, and we sell t-shirts and things like that, hats and stuff. And I did have people at the Litecoin event coming up and paying with Bitcoin. But I didn't have anyone at the Litecoin event pay with Litecoin. And I would have taken either money because I would just cash it in for Bitcoin, you know, instead of holding on to it. Because I think at that time it was $92 or something. So, but not one person out of the whole weekend paid with Litecoin, where several people paid with Bitcoin. So I don't know. I think they just buy it to hope to make some money off of it.
So Gary, buy the news, sell the rumor. Or buy the rumor, sell the. Yeah. No, I know that, and I just flipped it on its head. Buy the rumor, sell the news. Okay, you know, we've seen it time and time again where the Bitcoin halving takes place, and my goodness, it's a frenzy for Bitcoin, right? And you know, we're less than a year away from the time that's proposed for the next halving. Well, is that going to be already priced in? How do you deal with that when, you know, people have now a precedence on what's been taking place? I mean, is that going to be a situation where, you know, you really are not going to be able to trade it as we have in the past because of the known trading? You know what I mean? Once the market knows, or people know what the market's going to do, it doesn't normally do what you expect it to do, right?
Yeah. Well, if people could see everything in the future, they'd be some rich people. And I guess there are a few that can do that. But, you know, on this halving, you've got to realize, and I was trying to think in my mind real quick while you were talking, you've got now the Cash App. You know, the Cash App is buying 10% of all newly mined Bitcoin getting bought by the Cash App. And then you have, oh gosh, what is that global, I can't think of the name of it off the top, but you might have seen the TV commercial where the guys had the gold shopping carts and stuff, and it says buy Bitcoin, and they're a fund for a Bitcoin fund. They're buying 20% of all the newly mint Bitcoin. So, you know, you got that fund buying 20% of all the newly minted Bitcoin. You have the Cash App buying 10% of all the newly minted Bitcoin. And you have Bakkt on the scene, which that was a little lower than we expected. You have TD Ameritrade doing Bitcoin now. None of these things have ever been in place before with a Bitcoin halving. So I don't think we can really use past history even maybe as to what happens on a Bitcoin halving, because up till this halving, everything was being driven by the retail trade, you know, like you and me, you know, nothing to do with, like I said, those two people represent 30% of the Bitcoin, those two companies. You know, so of all the newly minted Bitcoin, at least was newly mined Bitcoin. So I think this happening is going to be a little bit different, I feel, than in the past. I think you could probably use the past as a sign to see what's happening. I think after the happening, it's usually dropped a little bit and then gone through its ride, you know, but I'm curious to see myself what happens on this one because there's so many things different this time.
Sure. Absolutely. And I'm totally with you. I'm very excited about all that's going on in the space. We really haven't seen a way for, you know, Bitcoin to be used in the financial world in terms of like managed money, you know, the big hedge funds and things. I mean, we're starting to see that, but I mean, it's still not being done on a scale that I think is really going to impact the price of Bitcoin. And, it's so hard to get a metric or, some sort of valuation on something that's brand new, right? We don't have a historical metric like we would value a stock or value precious metals, or, the gold to silver ratio, which was something that came about because we've analyzed it for many, many years, and now we can make some sort of fundamental analysis on it. But Bitcoin is just brand new. It's 10 years old, as you said, and the world has yet to really be able to figure it out, right? It's still being introduced, this early stage. So having said that, what are some of the biggest things that you see entering Bitcoin that is going to, take it to the next level, whether that's a $50,000 price, $100,000 price? I'm not sure kind of where you would see Bitcoin being fairly traded, but I mean, based on past performance, the sky's the limit, seems like.
I think one of the big things to look at right now was an announcement, I think, or an article I read last week about Venezuela. I'm not saying Venezuela is a great country or anything, but from what I understand, the state banks have been ordered to look at how to hold Bitcoin, how to hold that for the government. So if you start having nations, that would be the first nation. I'm not saying it's a good nation. I'm just saying to be the first nation actually to start holding and announce that they're holding Bitcoin. So I think once you get nations and countries holding Bitcoin, I really think it's Katie bar to the door. I mean, I'm surprised the U.S. government's not holding any. Oh my gosh, they just print all the money they want. I mean, it's not like it would hurt any. It's not like they're going to lose anything. I mean, they just print as much as they want. You think they'd be hodling a ton of it? It's, for instance, I heard the other day someone talking about how Bitcoin was made by the CIA, and they invented it. Well, who cares who invented it? It's still open source. I mean, nothing can be done. But I think that's going to be one of the big things that we'll see in the future, near future, is nation states start buying them. And I'm sure it's going to be states that we consider bad guys and that we've cut off their markets because they're forced to buy it, to transfer money. Sure. And I'm sure that's why Venezuela wants to do it, so they can transfer money, because they can't transfer dollars.
Well, what an interesting dynamic, right? Bitcoin kind of started off with, in the world of anti-government, people that really question government, and and I would put myself in the category, and being seen as a tinfoil hat guy, doomer, all of these different things. But for it to go mainstream, it's going to have to break out of that stigma, or maybe it doesn't even need it. Maybe it just ignores the stigma completely. But I feel like it's always going to have that resistance from the mainstream, from the governments and conventional wisdom, because it's really, the antithesis of the conventional financial system. And it's going to have an uphill battle to face for it to go mainstream. Unless it just happened. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, having said that?
Well, I think you're correct on that. And also it's kind of like, it's the opposite of what a lot of people in money business want to happen, is an uncontrollable resource out there that's the most valuable commodity there is, which that's what a lot of people expect to happen with Bitcoin. Because of that, though, I think that's where you get a lot of this bad information that we get, is people with their own agendas trying to promote their own agendas. Saying that Bitcoin, for instance, is used by drug lords more than anything else. Oh my gosh, is that why almost all money has traces of cocaine on it? Because of that? I mean, think about it. I read a thing where the cartels had the bank windows where you slide your money in made to fit a certain size Samsonite suitcase. So they could slide the Samsonite suitcases into the banks in that town, and they knew how much money would fit into a briefcase. So they could just slide 10 briefcases through there, I guess, and say there's $50 million or whatever. I don't know. So I think information like that is being put out, though, and I'm sure there's bad stuff being done with crypto. Don't get me wrong. There's bad stuff being done with anything, that they can find to take advantage of. But I think that's the kind of information we see being put out to slow down the development of Bitcoin, is that people get, because you ask a lot of people about it, they go, that's what that's drug lord stuff or something, where it's just money and drug lords like money no matter how they get it.
Sure. Well, one thing that I know gets people's attention is price. And I know we try to stay above that, stay above the fray, stay above the frenzy on price. But the fact is, the reason why Bitcoin was being discussed in 2017 to such a large degree, and even this year when we saw it go back to 14,000, was because of price. The amount of capital that was entering the crypto space got a lot of people's attention. And I believe the more price action we see in the space, the more it is going to attract capital and bring in the attention that it needs and be self-fulfilling in so many ways. So I do believe that's going to happen. And having said that, Gary, man, you've given us so much interesting information. I want to give you an opportunity to share some closing thoughts, maybe respond to that. But before you go, I want you to also let everyone know about your conferences and your websites. But before you do that, give everyone a response to what we're seeing in the crypto space based on what I was just saying.
Yeah, what you're just saying, we did see the Bitcoin getting back in the news, or crypto, whatever you want to call it, when it started going back up to 14. But I think you'd have to agree, we did not see anywhere close to the amount of news for it going back up to 14 that we did in 2017 when it hit 14. In 2017, by the time it hit 14, they were showing you actually how to buy XRP on MSNBC. I mean, so we didn't see anywhere near that kind of information. We did see some, though. I think it's going to have to pass 20 before we see that kind of talking again, because evidently 14 is not it to get it back up there. So it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, before we do see that happen, though. There are a lot of people who expect big things. People say all kind of crazy things, though. Banks aren't going to go out of business because of Bitcoin. They'll probably start figuring out how to hold Bitcoin for people, because people don't want to do that themselves. Is what they'll do, and they'll become places where people hold their Bitcoin. But I think we'll see as Bitcoin creeps up and gets close to 20, then we'll start seeing a lot of news, and then the action happens. Then people start getting scared, fear of missing out. You're going to start having FOMO, and then that's it. Because until there's FOMO, it's really not going to go too crazy until people are scared of missing out, and they're just blindly throwing their money in there, which they shouldn't do. And they're putting more in there than they can afford to lose, which they shouldn't do. Those are the kind of things. But on my conference, if anyone is interested, my conference is at bitblockboom.com. And I can tell you right now, it's a Bitcoin maximalist conference. It's not a crypto conference. It's not a blockchain conference. It is a conference where all we talk about is Bitcoin. And usually most of the people there are pretty high conversations. It's not what is Bitcoin. This is not the conference to go to. I wouldn't say if you don't know what Bitcoin is and you want to learn what Bitcoin is. If you're really into Bitcoin, this is a good conference to go to. But you can go to bitblockboom.com, or you can check out any of my podcasts at cryptopodcaster.com. I have like 5 podcasts, I think, now about cryptocurrency, and that's kind of my home base there is cryptopodcaster.com for all my info.
Gary Leland, everyone. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time with us today here at Crush the Street and just sharing your wisdom and years of experience in the world of cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Sometimes I get off track during my conversation there. So if I wandered off a little, everybody forgive me. That's just the way my brain works, which may not be too good.
No, not at all. We enjoyed it very much. And then thanks for the update. It's an interesting time right now. And it's good to kind of get back on track and talk to somebody who's seen this a few times, right? Because a lot of people may have just gotten in 2019 and they're wondering what's going on. So it's a good time to do this interview and kind of, set everything straight.
Would never put in more than you can afford to lose. I think that goes with anything, though.